Hi everyone, Kate here with another Victober video. And this one was requested when I went around asking for Victober video suggestions and requests. One was Victober Surprises. So books that I didn't think I was going to like and I ended up liking, or I was surprised at how much I liked them, or the reverse, a book that I thought I was going to love and I ended up not liking. I tend to not talk about those as much on my channel because it's not as fun to talk about books I dislike, but I thought for this video I would. But the first was one that I loved, and that was Treasure Island by Robert Louis Stevenson. I am definitely a character reader. Characterization, I think it might be my first requirement in a book. If I don't like the writing style though, also I won't like it. But regardless, I just thought there was no way I was going to like Treasure Island. So I kept putting off reading it because then I knew I would be disappointed. But honestly, I'm glad that I put it off as long as I did because now it was such a treat last Victober. And last Victober, I actually ended up with a fair number of duds on my TBR, which is always a shame when that happens. But Treasure Island was a really lovely, lovely book in there. And I just love the kind of the romance of an adventure story and getting to follow Jim Hawkins as he's on this adventure full of unsavory characters and some that he doesn't know whether they're good or evil. And I just was on the edge of my seat. There are so many twists and turns, and I already, as I was reading it, thought how I couldn't wait to read it aloud with my son in a few years from now. And it was a great treat. Now then, on the flip side, unfortunately, I thought I was going to love The Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. I think because I grouped that in the same category as Dracula, which I thought I wouldn't like, and I ended up loving Dracula. However, with The Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, I just found myself a little disinterested in the plot, which is shocking because it's by the same author who wrote Treasure Island. Something about it did not pull me in, it did not grip me, and also it did not scare me. And I kind of want to be a little scared when I'm reading such an iconic, suspenseful book. I do wonder if I hadn't known the twist, which most people in the modern day know exactly what the title means to it. Something about it just didn't hit home with me. And then the next one that was a delightful surprise was The Book of Dragons by E. Nesbit. This is published in 1901, so it just makes the cut. And Jess from Dickens and Docs recommended this book, and I did it as a read aloud with Peter, my oldest son, and we both had so much fun. It had such a whimsical, imaginative feel to it. It is pretty low-key in the plots. I know a friend, she just read it herself and she was pretty disappointed with it. So maybe it was that I read it as a read aloud. I just found it to be incredibly charming, and I was really pleased that I did. And just each story involved a dragon in some different way. And the story that stands out the most to me is the dragon that swallows an entire town. I think that's such a fun concept. The next one that was a disappointment was Barry Lyndon. And the reason that Barry Lyndon by Thackeray was such a disappointment is that I started off and it's narrated in first person and he's telling you these really interesting things. And then it ended up just boring me so much. It's like so much happened rapid fire that I felt I didn't get to know the people at all. And then it didn't help that the protagonist was extremely obnoxious. Like he was just constantly commenting on how overweight his wife was, and he's extremely lecherous, just constantly pursuing women that are way younger than him. And I think I was supposed to like him as a reader too, so that's why this cognitive dissonance kind of set in, and I don't know, I just didn't really like it. Another disappointment was The Trail of the Serpent by Mary Elizabeth Braddon. The first Victober I read Lady Audley's Secret, and I will get to that one in a moment. So I went in with high expectations the next year for The Trail of the Serpent. I was reading it with about 6 other people and we kind of just dropped like flies. Somehow I made it through this book, but it was not a fun experience. Basically, 75% of the book, you're with the villain who is extremely one-dimensional and not interesting. 25% of the book, you're with this fascinating mute detective, and you're barely with him at all. And so it was just about all the wrong people, and it was her attempt at a detective novel, and it was her first book. You could tell. The next one is David Copperfield. If you've been watching my content, you know how much I love David Copperfield. And I think I just had no idea how much I was going to love this book. I went into it kind of blind. I had a basic idea of the plot, but I just did not know it would just worm its way into my heart and just make me want to hug it every time I finished a reading session. I really love David Copperfield. The next book on the list is Mary Barton. I was extremely scared to read this because it was my last unread Elizabeth Gaskell novel. And I was worried, what if I don't like it? And that will be such a sad note to end my first read of all of hers, but I loved this. It's thrilling. You have characters you're really rooting for. It is basically like a suspense novel, suspense industrial novel. Not a combination you think would go together, but it is just high stakes in some parts, and it has a really, some really sweet aspects to it, and it's just delightful. It's Elizabeth Gaskell, so are we surprised? I don't think so. Next is Adam Bede. This was the book that made me decide George Eliot was was a favorite Victorian author. I had some so-so reading experiences. I was glad to be done when I finished Middlemarch. I liked Daniel Deronda, but still wasn't sure if she was going to be a favorite author. And this sealed the deal. It is a page turner. It is extremely harrowing. It is right at my pain threshold. And it makes you feel lots of feelings, and it's just amazingly done. Her writing is so beautiful and poignant, and I love the depth that you get to go to with the characters' innermost thoughts. And the next surprise was Goblin Market by Christina Rosetti. I am not one to read a ton of poetry, and I'm trying to fix this each Victober with having a poetry collection to read. I loved this. I loved it. She has... Well, Goblin Market is the longest poem in here, and it is so beautiful and just sensual of a poem. And you are just, the writing is incredibly evocative. But combine that with, she writes the most beautiful devotional poetry, and just how integral her faith was to her identity. It's so beautifully done in this poetry collection. And it's so beautiful. I definitely will be rereading it at some point. Hopefully sooner rather than later. The next one is Vanity Fair by Thackeray. I was pretty excited for Vanity Fair because I find the plot very interesting. The newer miniseries that was made a few years ago is excellent. And also Gone with the Wind by Margaret Mitchell is supposed to be a retelling. This, however, it has all the plot, but the characterization is just not up to Kate House standards, and I really wanted to get to know the characters more, and I didn't, and I just I can't be invested in characters that I feel like I don't have a feel for them. Becky Sharp, I was disappointed because she is a really interesting character, but you don't really get in her head at all. You're just seeing what she's doing, the choices she's making. So unfortunately, it was a disappointment for me, but I know a lot of people really love it. I wish that I loved it. The next one is Grania by Emily Lawless. I asked for a review copy of a book from Victorian Secret Publishers, and this is the one that they sent me. And most books that I kind of don't know anything about, is this odd? I go in just expecting a 3-star reading experience. I don't know why. It's just kind of by default. That's what I expect, that I'm just not going to be blown away. It has just this wonderful otherworldly, almost fantastical aesthetic to it. And there is just this sense of this ominous sense while you're reading the book, and it just packs such a punch. It is only around 200 pages and so worth your time. Also, if you get the Victorian Secret Publishers edition, they have so much supplemental material. They have an introduction. They tell you about the author. You get to learn about the Aran Islands, the concept of the new woman, marriage in the Victorian era, motherhood. It's amazing. This is such a powerful, powerful book that it's brief. But if you go in wanting just this bright burst of a book, I think you'll like it. And then was The Doctor's Wife by Mary Elizabeth Braddon. This was such a delight after the year that I had with Trail of the Serpent. And what I love is this is a book for book lovers. There are so many Victorian novels referenced in this. I would actually steer clear of this, though, until you read Dombey and Son, because she loves Dombey and Son, and it's referenced so much in here, and the ending of it. I think what am I trying to say? I love the balance that Mary Elizabeth Braddon has with characterization and plot, and she has beautiful writing. It's just that chef's kiss of a Victorian novel to me. I think that sometimes people think that her writing is going to be subpar because she's a sensation novelist, but I think she is right up there with some of the greats, and I loved The Doctor's Wife. And especially, it's kind of her take on Madame Bovary. So it has made me want to read Madame Bovary. And yeah, excellent, excellent book. And the next one was The Haunted Hotel by Wilkie Collins. The only reason I got through this was that I had a drive on a certain day, and I was going to meet my friend Becky, and it was the only audiobook I had on my phone. And so I listened to it on the way there and on the way back, and I finished it. It is a short little book, and I think it has a couple different stories in it. It bored me senselessly. I was so bored. It had a really confusing, convoluted plot. I did not like The Haunted Hotel. Never revisiting it, because then the next surprise, why would I do that when I have other books like The Woman in White that I enjoy so much by Wilkie Collins? This one, I was intimidated by the length, and I actually, 2 times prior to when I started it in Victober 2017, I think is when I read it, I had a false start with this book, and I wasn't ready for it. And so sometimes you just can't force it if you're not ready for a book, because then once I was ready for it, I was so ready for it. I cannot get over how good this book is, and I have been craving a reread of it. I don't know when I will reread it, but I just love, you are on the edge of your seat following these characters, and the sisterly bond between Marion and Laura is beautiful. Just to see the lengths that they will go to the lengths that they will go to for each other, and the care that they have. Oh, so touching. Then we have Lady Audley's Secret. This was my first Mary Elizabeth Braddon. I went in just thinking there was going to be nothing I could like about this. I thought it was kind of just your run-of-the-mill kind of trash literature, and I was so wrong. This is such a good book. I'm excited because I am reading this with my Patreon book club for the month of September. So this will be past tense then, because I'm filming this before September. And I'm very excited to reread it. I hope it lives up to my memory of it, because I loved this book. And I know a few people have already finished it, and they really liked it. So looking forward to that discussion. Please don't write this off just because you think it's like this cheap novel. Try Lady Audley's Secret if you haven't had an open mind about it before. The next one is A Welsh Witch. This was put out by Hano Classics, and they sent me several books, which was so lovely of them, and this was one of them. And I just thought on a whim, why don't I pick up A Welsh Witch? Again, like Grania, it has this otherworldly, almost kind of supernatural-esque atmosphere to it. It has characters I was so invested in. I love that it's set in this little seaside town that is a setting in Victorian novels that I am such a sucker for. I love it in any Victorian novel, and this was no exception. It just makes for this very kind of high drama feel to the novel. And it's this little town, and you're just following different characters. There's a love triangle of sorts, and I just can't recommend this enough. So beautiful. And I know that Lucy from Lucy the Reader really loved Torn Sails, and then maybe by Berwin Banks by Alan Raine, so I want to read more by her. And I'm so glad she didn't write just A Welsh Witch. And then one that just, I'm very sentimental about reading this for the first time, and that is Lorna Dune. I adore this book so much, and it was one that, again, an adventure sort of tale. I didn't know if I was going to like it, and even though the characterization isn't the strongest, I think that the writing style is so charming and endearing, and this has such a sentimental feel to it, and I love just doing life with these characters. You're just following them through several years, and there is kind of this really big feud happening with the Doone clan, so it feels very epic, and I love Lorna Dune. Next is Dombey and Son, another Dickens that I went into this blind. This I read my first Victober, and it was such a great way to experience my first Victober, was having a new favorite Dickens book. And I loved every single character in this. I didn't necessarily like them, but I loved them as being a part of the book. I was fascinated. I was hooked. I could not put it down. It was just a lovely book. And since it was so long, I took the whole month to read it. And it was like this friend I could come back to each day. So, so great. And then lastly, a lovely Victober surprise, and that was Sylvia's Lovers. This was another one I read my very first Victober and is a favorite book now. And again, with the otherworldly, almost fantastical atmosphere. I love that in Victorian literature, another seaside location. So if the glamour and romance of the story is enough, I guess the characterization doesn't have to be quite as strong. And since the seaside feels like such a character in and of itself, and I think Gaskell's nature writing is the strongest it ever is in Sylvia's Lovers. So I just soaked up all the beautiful prose in it, and I cannot wait to reread this at some point. Oh, it was glorious. I hope you enjoyed hearing about my Victober surprises. Let me know down below if you have participated in prior Victobers, some books that ended up surprising you, either because you didn't like them or because you did like them. Thank you, as always, for watching, and I will be back with another video soon. Bye.